As shown by Mr. du Plessis and Ms. Hassim, the military attack is genocidal in its pattern. I shall demonstrate that it is also consistent with the explicit, stated, and continuing genocidal intent of the State of Israel. Firstly, to the knowledge of Israel, Rafah is the last refuge of Gaza, the only remaining area in the Gaza Strip which has not been substantially destroyed by Israel, the only area that can host displaced people, the only remaining center of humanitarian aid, and the host to one of the few remaining large hospitals across the entirety of Gaza. Rafah is the last stage of the total annihilation of Palestinian life. Without Rafah, the possibility to rebuild and reconstruct Palestinian life will be lost forever. For Palestinians to continue to exist as a protected group under the Genocide Convention, they need a place from which to rebuild. As we stand here today, Rafah is that place, the last stand. Secondly, Israel also knows of explicit warnings about the genocidal consequences of an attack in Rafah. On 6 May 2024, the Director General of the World Health Organization warned that a full military incursion into Rafah will plunge the crisis into unprecedented levels of humanitarian need. On 8 May 2024, 2 days after the military attack had begun, he stressed that one of the 3 hospitals in Rafah, Al-Najjar, was no longer functioning due to the ongoing hostilities in its vicinity and the military operation in Rafah. Since the border was closed, the United Nations was prevented from bringing fuel, without which all humanitarian operations would stop. Martin Griffiths, the United Nations Relief Chief, has rung alarm bells. He has warned that the simplest truth is that a ground operation in Rafah will be nothing short of a tragedy beyond words. No humanitarian plan can counter that. The rest is detail. Palestinians do not need any more diplomatic gesturing, no more abstract words, no more virtuous condemnations and denunciations of Israel's actions. There is no more time to spare. It is simply now or never. Israel has knowledge of the pronouncements I have cited above. After all, each of them was made publicly. Thirdly, the State of Israel knows of the decisions of this court, which bear on it as a state party to the Genocide Convention directly and require of it to respect its obligations under the Convention and the moral and legal authority of this court. The decision of this court on 26 January 2024 noted that the civilian population in the Gaza Strip is extremely vulnerable and that the catastrophic humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is at serious risk of deteriorating further before this court renders its final judgment. Bearing this in mind, the court recognized that the military operation conducted by Israel after 7 October 2023 has resulted inter alia in tens of thousands of deaths and injuries and the destruction of homes, schools, medical facilities, and other vital infrastructure, as well as displacement on a massive scale. In light of this situation, Israel was ordered to ensure with immediate effect that its military does not commit any acts that fall within Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. One of the measures indicated expressly required of Israel to take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. In the decision of 16 February 2024, this court was compelled to demand that Israel immediately and effectively implements the court's order of 26 January 2024. This court cautioned that the most recent developments in the Gaza Strip and in Rafah in particular would exponentially increase what is already a humanitarian nightmare with untold regional consequences. In the order of 28 March 2024, this court observed with regret the existence of exceptionally grave circumstances since its order of 26 January 2024 and its decision of 16 February 2024, that the catastrophic living conditions of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip had deteriorated further, in particular in view of the prolonged and widespread deprivation of food and other basic necessities to which the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have been subjected. The court issued its orders clearly highlighting the worsening conditions of life faced by Palestinians in Gaza. Israel was ordered to ensure with immediate effect that its military, through any action, does not commit acts which violate the rights of Palestinians under the Genocide Convention. So far, Mr. President, what I have said is not inference, not imputation. It is direct knowledge which bears on the state of Israel, its political leaders, and the members of its army. They know about Rafah and its centrality to the sustenance of Palestinian life at the present moment. They know the views of the organs of the United Nations about the consequences of a military attack on Rafah. They know what this court has ordered on each of the 3 occasions I have referenced. Yet, Israel's leaders have continued to incite genocide and to express their own genocidal intent. In doing so, not only has Israel ignored its obligations as a state party to the Genocide Convention, it has also treated this court with contempt and threatened the rule of law. Let me demonstrate this. Members of the Israeli Ministerial Committee on National Security Affairs and the War Cabinet have simply continued with incitement to genocide. First, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a member of the War Cabinet and the Security Cabinet, has gone beyond any reference to Hamas alone. Instead, he has described Israel's aims in the military assault as being to ensure that Gaza will never again constitute a threat to Israel. He describes Israel's objective as being to achieve total victory, underscoring that no force in the world will stop us. We will stand alone, emphasizing that Israel will fight with its fingernails. Second, the Israeli Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, a member of both the War Cabinet and the Security Cabinet, has made it clear that Israel is taking apart neighborhood after neighborhood and will reach every location in Gaza. Third, the Israeli Minister of Finance, Bezalel Smotrich, a member of the Security Cabinet, has asserted in terms, there are no half measures. Rafah, Day al-Balah, Nusrat, total annihilation. He goes on to say, we are negotiating with the ones that should not have existed for a long time. For Israeli members of cabinet, it is as if there is no court order which binds them. They are not the only ones, regrettably. In an interview broadcast on Israeli television on 3 May 2024, the vice chair of the international arm of the Likud party, the party to which the Israeli prime minister belongs, stated, I think we needed to invade Rafah yesterday, to go in and to get them. There are no uninvolved. We need to go in and kill and kill and kill. We need to kill them before they kill us. Taking their cue from the politicians, the Israeli army officials have followed suit in entrenching the incitement to genocide and showing their contempt for this court. The Israeli Army Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, stated following the Israeli Army siege and destruction of Al-Shifa Hospital in March 2024, here is the realization of an impressive strategy. There is a very, very important message here. A hospital is not a safe place. He described the operation as a very high achievement. That is notwithstanding eyewitness reports of hundreds of civilians having been killed by Israeli troops in the hospital, including patients shot dead in their hospital beds. Mass graves and hundreds of Palestinian bodies were found following the withdrawal of the Israeli army from Al-Shifa hospital, including bodies with cannulas in their arms, some with their limbs tied. Brigadier General David Bar Khalifa, commander of the 36th Armored Division of the Israeli Army, issued a letter to Israeli soldiers about to deploy in Gaza, exhorting them to continue the killing of Palestinians. What has been will be no more. We shall go out to it in war. We shall pulverize every accursed plot of land from which it came. We shall destroy it and the memory of it. Brigadier Khalifa has faced no investigations, nor has he been relieved of his command. This is despite the explicit order of this court for investigations into cases of incitement to genocide. Brigadier Khalifa was in fact promoted to the rank of major and the head of the Israeli Army Personnel Division. Similarly, when 130 senior officers in the Israeli army penned a letter calling on Israel's war cabinet to not allow humanitarian supplies and the operation of hospitals in Gaza, they were not charged with incitement or prosecuted. One of the officers would later be named as involved in the killing of World Central Kitchen workers. Genocidal rhetoric is not punished, but rewarded by the Israeli government. On 6 March 2024, reservist First Sergeant Yashin, a veteran from the April 1948 Deir Yassin massacre of at least 250 Palestinians, was rewarded with a certificate of thanks and commemoration by the Israeli president for his motivational speeches he gave to Israeli soldiers as they prepared for the ground invasion of Gaza in October 2023. In at least one of those speeches, he had said, "Erase the memory of them, erase them, their families, mothers, and children. These animals can no longer live." In his speech at the award ceremony, Israeli President Herzog told the senior reservists, including Ezra Yachin, that you have been a tremendous personal example for generations of Israel's citizens and the whole world. And I want to, on behalf of all the Israeli people, to say to you, thank you. In their destruction of Rafah, Israeli soldiers deployed to Gaza continue to invoke the Prime Minister's speeches, which are themselves genocidal. In case what I've said is not clear enough, let us hear them in their own words. The destruction of Gaza and Palestinian life is understood by commanders and soldiers, as the video shows. An Israeli soldier from the 9203 Battalion commented as follows on photographs and footage he posted online of Palestinian homes and neighborhoods in Khan Yunis completely destroyed by the Israeli army. This year, we were honored to fulfill the command of the annihilation of Amalek, and may we finish the job. Such language continues to be widespread alongside calls by Israeli soldiers on the ground to conquer Gaza, to flatten Gaza, to erase Gaza, to destroy Gaza, and after that, Ramallah also. Israeli soldiers serving in Gaza continue to openly call for the deaths to Arabs, declaring, "May you burn alive," that Gaza is burning, that we will burn your mother, and that all of Sajaiya will burn in flames. The aims of Israel is to do no less than what its own Minister of Finance has stated. That is to ensure the total annihilation of Palestinians that will erase the memory of Amalek. He has also called for Rafah to be completely conquered, and the sooner, the better. Israel's genocidal intent continues to receive support and endorsement at the Knesset. As Tali Gottlieb, a member of the Knesset and the Prime Minister's party, has stated, to attack Rafah, as we attacked in the Northern Strip, unlike the responder, intentionally, not specifically addressing, but rather the entire Rafah system, to attack mercilessly from the air, instead of turning an eye to the Hague Court, turn an eye to the people of Israel. Public statements such as this show that even members of the Israeli parliament are fully aware of the orders of this court, but have continued to openly incite genocide without censure. Such sentiments are also widely expressed across Israeli society. Many Israelis, including Israelis living in illegal settlements in the West Bank, have actioned statements by government officials calling for the denial of aid to Gaza by destroying food aid on its way, including setting trucks on fire, putting sugar in tanks, and destroying the food itself. Israeli public officials, including singers inciting to genocide in Gaza, have had their incitement rewarded. One singer who popularized and adapted to Israel's current military operations in Gaza the racist Israel football chant, "May your village burn," changed it to "May Gaza be erased," and singing it to Israeli soldiers in live performances, was presented with a certificate of appreciation for his work for the IDF soldiers during the war by the Deputy Speaker of Knesset, hosted by Israel's Minister of Social Equality and the Advancement of Women. Another singer referenced by South Africa before this court in the January 2024 application for his call to erase Gaza and not to leave a single person there has similarly been rewarded. Both were brought to the attention of Israeli authorities in South Africa's application and pleadings before this court. Neither of them, nor any of the other Israeli officials and civilians inciting to genocide against the Palestinians have been prosecuted, much less punished. The genocidal acts described in South Africa's application were foreseen and foreseeable from the onset. Israel's intent was always to destroy Palestinian life and to wipe them off the face of the earth. Rafah is the final stand. Without Rafah, there is no more Palestinian life in Gaza to speak of, no more Palestinian identity, and no possibility of reconstruction. Mr. President, the rule of law can only survive through the orders of this court. If the rule of law is to have any meaning, let it be today and with this case. It is no longer enough to order unhindered access to humanitarian aid when it is in fact the military operation in Gaza that is preventing it. It is no longer enough to encourage compliance with the peremptory precepts of the Genocide Convention when Israel's deliberate contempt for the international rule of law has been so plain and so public. Mr. President, it is now my honor to call upon Ms. Blene Niklori to address the courts on the remedies we ask for and why this court can and should grant the order.
I thank Mr. Mugaiti for his statement. J'appelle à présent Madame Blene Niklori à la barre. Vous avez la parole, Madame.
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les juges, c'est un grand honneur pour moi de paraître à nouveau devant la Cour de la part de l'Afrique du Sud, même si je ne peux que regretter les circonstances tragiques et extrêmement graves qui m'y emmènent. En effet, aujourd'hui, soit près de 5 mois après votre première ordonnance en indication des mesures conservatoires, la bande de Gaza est presque entièrement rasée. Jour après jour, encerclé de toutes parts, son peuple palestinien, hommes, femmes, enfants, des familles entières, soumis à la campagne militaire génocidaire de l'État d'Israël, est massacré, terrorisé, affamé et traumatisé à jamais. Au vu des développements dramatiques en cours sur le terrain à Gaza, l'Afrique du Sud se voit ainsi dans l'obligation de solliciter à nouveau votre précieuse intervention et vous implore de modifier ou d'indiquer des nouvelles mesures conservatoires, notamment et de manière explicite une cessation immédiate des opérations militaires israéliennes à Rafah et partout ailleurs dans le territoire, aux fins de sauvegarder et de prévenir un anéantissement total de ce qui reste de la bande de Gaza, de la Palestine et de son peuple. Mr. President, members of the Court, there is an urgent need for further or modified explicit and specific provisional measures to protect the Palestinians in Gaza from the irreparable prejudice caused by Israel's continuing violations of the Genocide Convention and of this Court's orders, including an express order for the immediate cessation of Israel's military operations in Rafah and across the whole of the Gaza Strip. The change in circumstances and new facts demand it. The extreme risk of irreparable prejudice require it. Israel's approach to the Court's previous orders renders it imperatively urgent. The Court has the power to do it, and our shared humanity compels it. Turning to each of those 5 propositions in turn, first, the change in the situation amounting to new facts demands the indication of further or modified explicit and specific provisional measures. When South Africa appeared before you on the 11th of January, urgently requesting then an order for the cessation of Israel's military operations, humanitarians were already out of words to describe the situation in Gaza. Today they say there are, quote, no words left that can do any justice to the people of Gaza. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have since been killed or injured, including 1 child killed or wounded every 10 minutes since Israel's military operations began, including an almost incomprehensible number of child amputees. Since March in particular, hundreds and thousands of Palestinians, particularly the young, elderly and vulnerable, are dying or at risk of dying of communicable diseases and infections that are running rife due to the rising temperatures in ever more crowded living conditions amidst mountains of waste, fly and mosquito infestations and raw sewage flowing in the bombed-out streets. Since the Court's last order, entire hospitals, places of learning and healing, including Al-Shifa Hospital, older than the State of Israel itself, have been destroyed and turned into sites of horror and mass death. Gaza's devoted and steadfast doctors and medics have been killed and buried in mass graves, alongside the patients they risked and ultimately gave their lives to care for. The same fate now awaits Rafah's remaining hospitals, doctors and medics. Israel's attack on Rafah, its attempt to control all of Gaza's borders, followed by attacks on the north and the middle areas in recent days, which are of unprecedented violence, even amid the horrors of the past 7 months, herald a turning point beyond which there is no going back, which is reflected in what UNRWA calls, and I quote, a new level of desperation in Gaza. As this Court has heard, This is, in effect, the end game for Gaza and for its Palestinian people, unfolding under the world's watch. This may well be the last chance for the court to act to ensure their survival. Second, the extreme risks of irreparable prejudice demand the indication of further or modified explicit and specific provisional measures. The situation in Gaza could not be more urgent, as reflected in the increase in Palestinian fatalities and injuries since the court's last order and the spreading famine and disease. Acts susceptible of causing irreparable prejudice can plainly occur at any moment before the court makes a final decision on this case, demanding the indication of further or modified explicit, specific provisional measures to protect the rights found by this court to be plausible. In Rafah, in particular, in addition to the widespread risk of violent death and injury facing the terrified population of displaced Palestinians, as the court has heard, dialysis patients and premature babies face immediate risk of death. Some 1.2 million Palestinians will be deprived of access to healthcare if its hospitals are rendered inoperable. The level of destruction that Israel has caused across Gaza and is now wreaking on Rafah threatens the very survival of future Palestinian generations in Gaza. Recent evidence from a former Israeli reservist active in Gaza indicates that soldiers on the ground treat Israeli-ordered evacuation areas, such as those recently ordered for significant parts of Rafah and northern Gaza, as extermination zones, wherein orders to shoot and kill Palestinians are made on the basis of their location alone. This in itself demonstrates the extreme risk to the right of the Palestinians in Gaza not to be subjected to acts of genocide, as does the decision by Israel to deploy 2,000-pound so-called dumb bombs in ever more densely populated areas in the stated, quote, interests of saving more expensive armaments. The routine, repeated authorization of the killing in one strike of hundreds of Palestinian civilians, men, women, children, babies, the elderly and infirm, in order to kill a single individual believed to be a senior Hamas commander, is yet further evidence of that risk. So too are the repeated and routine authorizations for tens of Palestinians to be killed when Israel is bombing so-called low-level targets, so apparently low-level as to be nicknamed garbage targets. It is also now clear that Israel is heavily relying on artificial intelligence in identifying which Palestinians in Gaza are to live and to die. One such system appears to function as a form of target machine, generating so-called kill lists of Palestinians selected for execution on bases as tenuous as being in a WhatsApp group with another identified target. Another is the chillingly named Where's Daddy surveillance and tracking system, specifically intended to target those marked for execution when they're at home with their families. The mounting evidence is that Israel's very interpretation of its rules of engagement and of the application of fundamental concepts of international humanitarian law, including distinction, proportionality, necessity, and the very concepts of safe zones and warnings, is in fact itself genocidal, placing Palestinians at particular extreme risk. Third, Israel's contempt and willful disregard of the court's orders highlight the urgent need for further or modified provisional measures in the most explicit terms. In refusing Israel's request to reject South Africa's claim, and in indicating 9 provisional measures against Israel, the court found that Israel's conduct in Gaza gave rise to a real and imminent risk that irreparable prejudice would be caused to the rights of the Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from violations of the Genocide Convention, a risk which is now even more acute. The court's orders created international legal obligations binding on Israel to change its conduct in Gaza. The court made clear in February that those obligations require Israel, quote, to ensure the safety and security of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, end quote. Israel manifestly cannot ensure the safety and security of the Palestinian population in Gaza while besieging, bombing, starving, torturing and executing them. In its March order, the court took note of United Nations assessments that the catastrophic humanitarian situation can only be addressed if the military operations in the Gaza Strip are suspended. Yet Israel has ratcheted up its genocidal military campaign, entering Rafah, the last refuge for so many displaced Palestinians in Gaza. Israel has in parallel reportedly justified its continuing military operations on the asserted basis that, quote, there is no order forbidding us from doing something we're doing today, and the fighting will continue as usual. Indeed, Israel has gone so far as to claim that the court orders are a significant success on the grounds that the court, I quote, rejected South Africa's central request to stop the fighting in Gaza. The court's reluctance to date to order directly and explicitly that Israel cease its military operations in Gaza in order to give effect to the provisional measures indicated by the court, relying instead on necessary implication, has cynically been used by Israel as cover for its conduct. Israel continues to kill and harm Palestinians in Gaza in violation of the court's orders, while its soldiers and political leaders alike continue to publicly express clear genocidal intent towards them. It is self-evident that the provisional measures indicated in the court's previous orders, quote, do not fully address the consequences arising from the changes in the situation that now pertain. The severity of the situation involving horrific human suffering mandates that the court make explicit that which was implicit in its previous orders, and that it now order Israel to cease its military operations in unequivocal, express terms. Nothing else will suffice. In its March order, in light of what the court found to be, quote, the worsening conditions of life faced by Palestinians in Gaza, the court placed a heightened obligation on Israel not only to enable the provision of humanitarian assistance, but to ensure it. In light of Israel's abject failure to even meet the lower threshold of enabling aid and the ever-worsening conditions of life faced by Palestinians in Gaza following Israel's seizure of the Rafah crossing, the court must at least modify its provisional measures in order to leave no doubt as to what is required of Israel and to give full effect to its previous provisional measures. As the World Food Programme has made clear, I quote, the United Nations and its partners have the means to scale up to all 2.2 million people in Gaza, but only if a humanitarian ceasefire happens. Further, given Israel's manifest failure to ensure the preservation of evidence in Gaza, the recent repeated grim discoveries of mass graves and what the United Nations has called, quote, the prevailing climate of impunity in Israel, Israel must be ordered to immediately take all effective measures to ensure the access of persons able to investigate ongoing atrocities. The measure is critical not just to preserving the rights of Palestinians in South Africa in these proceedings, or indeed to the court's ability to exercise its own judicial functions appropriately. Rather, as a spokesperson for the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights recently stated, these violations should not get forgotten about. They need to be recorded, they need to be reported widely by the media, they need to result in pressure from member states that do have leverage over the parties to the conflict to bring such violations to an end. They need to be recorded so that investigations do take place, and ultimately there is accountability and the cycle of impunity does not continue over and over and over again. Fourth, the court has the power to modify or make an explicit order for Israel to cease its military operations in Rafah and in Gaza more broadly, and to withdraw from the Gaza Strip. The court is empowered and indeed compelled, given the prevailing catastrophic situation in Gaza, to order an express end to Israel's military activities. That is the only measure now capable of preventing irreparable prejudice to the fundamental rights in issue and of ensuring compliance with the court's orders. The fact that such an order would be directed at Israel alone is no bar to the court ordering it. That is for at least 3 reasons. 1, Article 41 of the court statute empowers the court to indicate any provisional measures that, quote, ought to be taken to preserve the respective rights of either party if it considers that the circumstances so require. Article 41 does not require reciprocity. There is no need for an order to be made against both parties. 2, the Genocide Convention itself is no bar to a one-sided cessation order. On the contrary, the absolute prohibition on genocide applies in both non-international armed conflicts, as indeed the terrible examples Rwanda and Darfur make clear, just as in international armed conflict between 2 states. It applies where only one belligerent is a party to the Genocide Convention, just as it applies where all of them are. It applies regardless of any claims of self-defence, which can never constitute a justification for genocide. And indeed it applies in peace just as much as in war. And that is because the prohibition on genocide is focused on the absolute inalienable rights of groups, of peoples, to be protected from genocide, no matter the underlying circumstances or putative justifications. It makes no sense whatsoever to suggest that the court could not order a state party to the Genocide Convention to suspend its military operations against a non-state actor in order to prevent genocide, unless the non-state actor was itself disarmed. Indeed, it would be contrary to the very objectives of the Genocide Convention, which the court described over 70 years ago as having been adopted for a purely humanitarian and civilizing purpose. It would similarly be nonsensical if, in a claim under the Genocide Convention, the court could order one party to cease its military operations when that party was not even alleged to be committing genocide, as in Ukraine and Russia, but could not hear when the court has itself determined a real and imminent risk to the right of a national, racial or ethnic group not to be subjected to acts of genocide. The evidence before the court indicates that the extent of the carnage in Gaza is of a much greater magnitude than that pertained in Ukraine and Russia. Indeed, the carnage in Gaza is of an order which exceeds by far the necessities of war and the limits imposed by the laws of war. As stated by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, what Israel is doing is, quote, beyond warfare. Not only is the court empowered to call for it to end, it is duty-bound to do so. Third, the fact that the United Nations Security Council could itself order a cessation of hostilities in Gaza is no bar to the court's exercise of its own powers in this regard. Notably, the distinct and vital role the court was intended to play in preventing genocide was pointedly foreshadowed by the United Nations delegation to the negotiations leading to the very creation of the Genocide Convention. The United States delegate commented that if cases of genocide were brought before the Security Council, the whole question of the veto would be involved. States might try to avoid submitting their disputes to the International Court of Justice, where they would be settled on purely legal grounds, and might instead submit them to the Security Council, where they would be settled on political grounds. In circumstances such as this, where the veto power has been wielded to such devastating effect against the Palestinian people, the indispensable role of a court in ensuring the universal application of the Genocide Convention, its prohibitions and its protections to all peoples equally, cannot be overstated. As noted by the court in indicating provisional measures in March, the Security Council's then operative ceasefire resolution, quote, demanded an immediate ceasefire for the month of Ramadan, respected by all parties, leading to a lasting, sustainable ceasefire. As underscored by the President of the Court, the March provisional measures could, I quote, only take full effect, end quote, if the ceasefire was respected. No such resolution is in place. The Court must itself, therefore, create the circumstances necessary for its provisional measures to take full effect It must order Israel to cease its military operations. Fifth and finally, our shared humanity compels the indication of further or modified explicit provisional measures. As recently stated by the United Nations Assistant Secretary-General for Humanitarian Affairs, quote, "The war in Gaza has entered yet another horrifying phase. Gaza is now a hellscape for millions trapped under incessant bombardment, where those who have escaped death and injury now risk losing their lives because of a lack of food, safe water, medicine and healthcare. Gaza has, in her words, become a moral stain on the conscience of our collective humanity." I conclude with a slide. It reports an account of a doctor's recent experience in a hospital in Gaza following his departure from the Strip. He says this, describing one of the patients there. "There was the man in his 50s, forgotten in a room, having had both legs amputated. He had lost his kids, his grandkids, his home, and he's alone in the corner of this dark hospital, maggots going out of his wounds, and he was screaming, 'The worms are eating me alive, please help me.' That was just one out of I don't know. I just stopped counting because those are the people I think of because they're still there." That sums up what Gaza is today. It's people severely wounded, with life-altering disabling injuries, bereaved of their entire families, homeless, alone, trapped, without electricity or even basic health care. 7 months later, after 2 orders from this court, they are still there, enduring this horror. They are crying out for help. An order for an immediate cessation of Israel's military operations in Gaza is now their only hope. Enough is enough. South Africa cannot but reiterate its respectful and humble call on this court to do what is in its power to do, what the drafters of the Genocide Convention called on it to do, what our shared humanity compels it to do, to listen to that desperate cry for help from Gaza, and to order Israel to withdraw from Gaza and to cease fire. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les juges, je vous remercie de votre bienveillante attention et je vous invite à demander à l'agente de l'Afrique du Sud de prendre le podium pour lire ses requêtes.
I thank Ms. Digarli for her statement. I now give the floor back to Mr. Ambassador. You have the floor, Excellency.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Court, it is my honor to deliver to Your Excellencies the final provisional measures that South Africa requests from this Court. The exponential gravity of the situation in Gaza has already demanded that South Africa return to this Court on 4 consecutive occasions, calling for provisional measures to stop the destruction of Gaza on a scale not witnessed since World War II. And epitomized by the most unbearable human suffering. Willfully ignoring the previous provisional measures, Israel is acting with complete impunity in Gaza, escalating hostilities in a final wave of apolitic destruction from which there is no return. There is a danger which stems from a form of amnesia and denial by former colonial powers in relation to the crimes associated with colonial violence perpetrated against indigenous peoples. This includes the denial of genocide. This denial is clearly at play in Palestine. Israel is a settler colonial apartheid regime, and the current government is now being accused of engaging in genocide. This accusation is not being leveled at any people based on their ethnicity, nationality, or confessional preference. Rather, it is being leveled at those political and military leaders who have dehumanized the Palestinian people through genocidal rhetoric as human animals, encouraging their killing and destruction. It is leveled against a state whose leaders are openly calling for a second Nakba, shielded by international impunity, which has enabled the perpetuation of decades of generational violence and systematic oppression against the Palestinian people to maintain the domination and the expansion of the settler colonial state. As a matter of extreme urgency, South Africa, as a state party to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, respectfully requests the Court to indicate the following provisional measures, the text of which has been amended to reflect the ever-increasing gravity of the situation. South Africa respectfully requests the Court to order the State of Israel as a state party to the Genocide Convention and as a party to these proceedings to, 1, immediately and further to its obligations under the Court's previous orders of 26 January 2024 and 28 March 2024, cease its military operations in the Gaza Strip, including in Rafah Governorate, and withdraw from the Rafah crossing and immediately, totally and unconditionally withdraw Israeli army from the entirety of the Gaza Strip. 2, immediately and further to its obligations under the Provisional Measure 4 of the Court's 26 January 2024 order and Provisional Measures 2A and 2B of the Court's decision of March 2024, take all effective measures to ensure and facilitate the unimpeded access to Gaza of United Nations and other officials engaged in the provision of humanitarian aid and assistance to the population of Gaza, as well as fact-finding missions, internationally mandated bodies and/or officials, investigators and journalists in order to access and record conditions on the ground in Gaza and enable the effective preservation and retention of evidence and ensure that its military does not act to prevent such access, provision, preservation or retention. 3, submit an open report to the Court, A, on all measures taken to give effect to these provisional measures within 1 week as from the date of this order, and B, on all measures taken to give effect to all previous provisional measures indicated by the Court within 1 month as from the date of this order. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Court, this concludes South Africa's pleading. I thank you for your kind attention. I also thank the Registry, its staff, and the interpreters for their invaluable assistance. Finally, my thanks also go to the South African team. Thank you very much.
I thank the agent of South Africa, whose statement brings to an end the single round of oral arguments of South Africa, as well as this afternoon's sitting. The Court will meet again tomorrow, Friday, May 17 at 10 a.m. to hear the State of Israel present its single round of oral argument. The sitting is adjourned.
Court just did its session 5 minutes ago. Like this? Is that okay? Okay. Huh?
No, I'm all right, thank you.
Simon. هيك
مرتاح مرتاح.
عندهم الصورة صح؟
خلاص
بس المؤتمر الصحفي تبع جنوب افريقيا راح يبدا بعد لحظات. الصورة عندكم في السادس بيجي see if we can fix the other coming on the side. I'll take a video that she's I'll take
Kijken of je microfoon kan halen met je kabel.
Mag binnen? Mag weer binnen? Heb je een langere kabel bij? Een geluidskabel in je kast?
De mic.
Als je eentje hebt van 3 meter is dat genoeg.
Nee, maar daar kan geen kabel op. Dit is
Just a second. Yeah.
er kan hier geen kabel aan. Dus dan zou je met deze
Yes,
moeten
and
doen.
I have
Ja,
clear.
met die. Wat denk je dat hij een
Dan
kabel
zou-
heeft van een meter of?
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Nee, ik heb geen kabel
Yes,
bij
yes,
me, maar
sorry,
misschien
okay.
iemand hier wel. Maar goed, maar ja,
Mark, do you happen to have a 4 meter cable?
maar ja,
We gaan het proberen met die micro.
ik denk hij is heel gevoelig, maar ik denk dat het
Dank je.
om zich spelen. Maar ik denk dat het beter is dan deze.
Ik denk je zelfs je eigen micro mag gebruiken dat je die eraf mag halen.
Maar dan doe ik deze, ja?
Ja. Ah ja, thank you.
I don't know if you can change it that fast.
Sorry. Oké, bye bye.
Maar Bart, denk je dat het gaat lukken om het vast te
Ja.
houden?
Het lukt me wel hoor. Ik ga wel vast.
Voor mij is het helemaal oké, maar
Dus-
als je het volhoudt.
Het lukt wel. Dus als ik het goed begrijp, heeft er iemand anders dezelfde...
Ja, ik dacht dat het soort van, ik hoorde het soms, maar niet de hele tijd. Dus ik dacht dat het aan de gevoeligheid lag of dat je het
Ja.
wilde of zo. Dus ik zat ook wel te kijken.
Ja. Hoe heet dat? Dezelfde radiolengte? Frequentie. Ja. Okay, here we go.
Just ask yes or no. I don't know what to do. Just asking you yes or no, just to get an answer. It will make me time.
I don't need to update the story. Yeah, exactly.
Hi, Marta. I'm live. They're about to arrive now. We fixed the sound with live this. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
No, I'm just pointing to the mic. That's okay.
It's good though.
اسمع هاتوا باللوجو خلاص.
Choked up. Yeah. Yeah, she's really good.
Yeah, I really put it. That's fine. They were loads of profiles of that last time.
There we go. That's it.
You're a bit too high with the mic.
Do you know what is that behind the... Adamın ayakkabısının arkasındaki şey ne öyle? Motorcu şey mi onlar? Sende var mı motor? Halleyicilerle bu şeycilerle falan oluyor ya. Belli olmaz abi.
Closer, please.
Closer, closer, this close, that close.
The mic.
Yeah, like that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Vusi Madonsela, the Ambassador of South Africa to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I'm standing in for our media liaison person, who's otherwise engaged at the moment. Otherwise, this is not my daily job. But I'm accompanied by the Director General of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Zain Dango, and Mr. Omar Hijazi from the Palestinian Authority. I'm going to give Mr. Dango the first opportunity to speak with you. After that, I'll give Mr. Hijazi to do the same, and after that, you will then have the opportunity to ask them a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Vusi. So I won't be long. I think it's important just to spell out why we came here. This is now the third time that we've come and asking for provisional orders. And we're asking for provisional orders because the situation in the whole of Gaza, but in particular in Rafah, has changed drastically since the last time we came to the court. What we're seeing is the genocidal acts intensifying. We're seeing the killings intensifying, and our legal teams have demonstrated the facts on these changing circumstances, including the genocidal acts in both Rafah and in Gaza. The legal teams specifically pointed out to the unabated killing since we came here in January, and they pointed out that at least 13,000 people died since we came in January and asked for these provisional orders. What we're asking for is the court to use its powers to stop this carnage. The court to use its powers in an unambiguous way to stop this. That we do not need the court to provide language that infers what Israel must do, that the court must explicitly state that Israel must stop its genocidal acts in Rafah, that it must stop its genocidal acts in Gaza, and that includes an unambiguous call to cease its military operations in Rafah and the whole of Gaza. The court has previously said that its calls for humanitarian aid to be provided unhindered can only be done if there is a ceasefire in place. What our legal team is pointing out is we should not depend on such a ceasefire to come through a political negotiation because it's not happening, or through some action at the Security Council because it's not happening. We're asking that the court uses its powers that has been conferred upon through the Genocide Convention to order the acts of genocide to end, and that includes an explicit order for the cessation of hostilities to end. We're also asking the court to ensure that it orders Israel to respect all of its previous provisional orders, including the very many orders regarding the unhindered access to humanitarian aid. So in essence, we've argued that all the conditions, the legal conditions, prevail for justifying our call for new provisional orders, because not only have the conditions changed, they've changed rapidly, and they've deteriorated much more rapidly since the last court described the situation as perilous. So we hope that the court will come and give us, will sit and give us the orders we ask for rather rapidly, because it is urgent.
Thank you, Mr. Omar. We now give the opportunity to Mr. Hijazi.
Allow me first to express our eternal gratitude to South Africa for taking the moral, legal and political stance to come forward and defend the humanity and defend the Palestinian people in the darkest chapter of their history and their Nakba. This ongoing Nakba that has been perpetuated for the last 76 years is now witnessing a new heights, which is very dangerous and threats the existence and the continuation of the Palestinian people on their land. Today, I think South Africa made it clear that the court needs to assert its authority in relation to the genocidal acts and the complete and utter disrespect and contempt that Israel is showing towards the orders that the court has issued, but furthermore to the whole international system that stands on laws and international system that is based on legal order. Today, South Africa, with this action, is defending this order, is protecting this order in the face of countries that are turning their back to this order and trying to play in semantics in order to absolve Israel of its responsibility. We believe that what South Africa is asking is the bare minimum of what is required of humanity today to end this carnage and this genocide that is taking place in Palestine against defenseless civilians, children, women, and elderly who have done nothing to face this utter disregard to their lives, except that they are living in Gaza and that they are Palestinians. This also extends furthermore to the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory. And for that, again, we reiterate that we are eternally gratitude to South Africa for its stance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You now have the opportunity to ask questions. Let us please be orderly so that everybody gets a chance to ask their question and hopefully be responded to adequately. You raise your hand, I point at you, please introduce the media house you come from and then pose your questions. Can we limit the number of questions to 2 at this stage per speaker? I'll start with you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. All right, thank you.
Are you together?
No, you are not.
Okay.
So, Anadolu News Agency, Salman Aksunger. So the question is, in the previous orders, the court also ordered the Israeli government to provide reports, and those reports were not able to your access. So this time you are asking for explicit access. Will you be able to any kind of have an access, or like someone who see the reports that how Israel is explaining his actions towards providing this humanitarian assistance or giving and enforcing these orders that are given by the court in its previous reports? Will you be able to any kind of have any access or any kind of like getting imply from these reports of Israel submitted to the court?
So in terms of the reports that Israel was required to submit with regards to the last provisional orders, they have put in a report. We are responding to that report, and in fact today was the deadline for us to submit. We have submitted today. So we hope that based on that, the court will use some of that reports also to adjudicate in terms of our new asks. In terms of our new provisional orders, Israel has not responded to the provisional orders that were under discussion today, so we will wait to hear what they do present tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Sir.
Thank you. From Faro in Central America. I'm trying to understand the rationale of what you're requiring today. You were very clear on your position, saying that Israel is incompetent and is not obeying the court's previous provisional measures. So if you believe that Israel will not obey any provisional measures, what's the point of asking for more? How do you think this changes the situation?
What we believe is that Israel is doing what it is doing because of decades of institutionalized impunity. Decades of Israel not responding or respecting UN Security Council resolutions that are binding, and we've seen over the last 7 months ignoring the binding orders of this court. What we're saying is, and as my colleague Mr. Ijaz has pointed out, we believe that this court should play the role that it was set up to play to ensure that Israel does comply. We also hope that countermeasures will now become a reality in other institutions of the United Nations system. This is the apex court, but we also have other institutions in the UN system that can compel Israel to meet its obligations. And we hope that these kinds of countermeasures will be swift and explicit. And this time we're asking for the provisional measures that the court orders to be explicit, not implicit. Not for people to infer that the court is saying there must be a ceasefire if this is to be happening. We're saying that the cessation of hostilities must happen. And as one of our lawyers pointed out in the pleadings today, the court has the powers to do that, and under the Genocide Conventions, it does not have to require all parties to be state parties for a ceasefire to be ordered. That a state involved in what has been already declared plausible genocide can be ordered to cease those activities. We are hoping that this court does this and that Israel does comply, because we are keen that the institutions of global governance, and particularly this apex court, is respected for global governance and the court to become the epitome of global justice that we all hope it can be.
Thank you. Ma'am.
How much faith do you still have in international justice if only after 4 months the situation has gotten worse? And how important is it that Egypt is now supporting your case?
Let me start with, I don't know if Omar, you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Look, I think, let me start with your last question first step. I think that Egypt joining is important, that you have a major power in the region joining our case is a signal that this institutionalized impunity is coming to an end, at least at the political level. And that Egypt is joining us in a legal action is equally important, because it's also profiling the fact that we are trying to use the institutions of global governance to effect what we've always wanted to do, effect firstly a peace in the short term, but also a long and lasting peace through ending the occupation, through negotiations. But for all of that to happen, the settler colonial activities and the genocidal actions that accompany that must end. And we are hoping that the institutions of global governance will this time be more explicit, and that all the countries that are currently supporting Israel, both explicitly or through non-action, will now act with a lot more vigor to ensure that their ally stops this genocidal action.
Yeah. If you allow me to add also that we have faith in humanity. And humanity has produced these norms in order to avoid going back to the crimes that were committed previously. And today humanity is showing its true face in relation to Palestine, with students taking in the universities, with the journalists who are paying their lives today in order to cover what's happening in Gaza, with the doctors who are being buried with those who they are defending. Humanity is also standing up for Palestine. It is certain governments that have decided and took the position of defending Israel. And this is a thin line that they are working in. And we should not allow them or give them the space to continue walking in. This is why we need to clarify these orders and leave no room for anyone to interpret it the way they want to interpret it, and to expose those media outlets and everyone who tries to obscure or to hide the crimes that Israel is committing. This is what we have faith in, and this is what we will continue to fight for, and we hope that we will prevail at the end, not only for the sake of Palestine, but for the sake of each and everyone who lives on earth. Because if we leave what Israel is doing today to the Palestinian people to pass without any accountability, it will come to haunt each and everyone living on this earth.
Thank you very much.
Well,
I'll
we
give
can't
you
raise
a
our hands for the country.
Yes, you're right.
yeah.
My question, are you optimistic about a speedy and swift ruling from ICJ?
We are optimistic. I think the fact that the opportunity to come and give oral pleadings was done with a level of urgency by the court. South Africa agreed to it almost immediately because we felt that we've made the application given the urgency, and we made sure that we, despite the short notice, about 2 days from the court, that we made our way here to ensure that we provide the kind of arguments that will enable the court to make the right decisions. So we hope, based on the very detailed, factual explanation offered by our legal team today, that the court will make a decision, and make that decision quite fast.
Yeah, and the court itself took notice of that by calling for these hearings swiftly. So we expect a swift response, which is aligned with the norms and the obligations stated in the Genocide Convention.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Abu Bakr Bashir from Al-Qahira Al-Khabariyya. Do you think this is a 100% legal battle, or there has been some political pressure put on you?
Can you explain that question?
Okay. Is it just a battle that's being fought in accordance with international law, with the court, or other factors are being inserted here, like political pressure on the governments, maybe?
By who?
By third parties, by the United States, by the West? supporters of Israel. Is there this political element there, or it's only legal thing?
The way I understand your question, I mean, certainly politics come into play, but here in front of the court you have to present facts and law. And what has been presented today is facts and law. Politics are being dealt with elsewhere. There are negotiations for ceasefire, which is also carried out by Egypt and Qatar and others. So there are political track that is taking place, and so far it has not succeeded in any results, just because Israel refuses to abide by any standards, including in relation to its closest allies. But today, here we are in a court of law presenting facts and law and legal arguments, and this court has been very well known in front of the whole world for its standing with law and abiding by the law.
So just to add to that, so from our side, approaching the court is purely because we believe the court has a duty to use its powers to ask Israel, under the powers of the Genocide Convention, to end the genocidal acts. So we're using the legal avenue, but of course, as a diplomat, we also engage in political discussions. We engage at the UN Security Council, at the General Assembly. You would have seen our statements there. We engage in dialogues with other stakeholders in the region, including the Egyptians and the Qataris and the US and others. So we believe all of those are important. But when it comes to the crime of crimes, the fact that this kind of crimes and other crimes have been committed with impunity over decades, that this is the correct forum to make a pronouncement on what it believes Israel must do to stop the genocidal acts.
Yeah. One last question, please. Any takers? It looks like you've had your fair share.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
All right. Don't
stand up. Okay. I damaged my knee.
We have luck.
That's the settlement. No, it's not for the court, but to show that we can solve the system.
Are they going to say that they didn't have enough time?
Yes, that's exactly what they're going to do. That's the card they're going to do. They just read on the WhatsApp that says it's
يلا دقيقة ثواني احنا جاهزين دقيقة ثواني
Thank you.
جاهزين اتصل ها؟ استاذ ايه جاهز اهلا مرحبا ايه هلا
There won't be second statement. And I will ask you if we get set for another hour and 5 minutes.
تمام سامع there will تمام عندي صورة قبل لحظات كان هناك مؤتمر صحفي لفريق الادعاء الجنوبي افريقي
Oh, thanks, amigo.
mag hem nu uitzetten.